You have seen a face somewhere it should not be, in the grain of a wooden door, in the folds of a curtain, in the clouds on an ordinary afternoon, in the shadows gathering in the corner of a dark room. You knew it was not real, and yet your brain had already reacted. Something in you had already looked twice. This experience has a name. Scientists call it pareidolia. It is the tendency of the human brain to perceive meaningful patterns, and especially faces, in random or ambiguous visual information. And it is not a malfunction. It is not a quirk. It is not something that happens only to certain people. Pareidolia is universal, automatic, and deeply embedded in the architecture of your visual system. Every human brain does this. Every human brain has always done this. The question worth asking is not whether it happens. The question is why. To understand pareidolia, you first have to understand how the brain processes faces at all. Faces are, neurologically speaking, special. Your brain does not treat them the way it treats other objects. In 1997, neuroscientists Nancy Kanwisher, Josh McDermott, and Marvin Chun identified a region in the human brain that responds specifically and powerfully to faces. They called it the fusiform face area. It sits in the fusiform gyrus, a structure in the temporal lobe of the brain, and it behaves differently from any other region of the visual cortex. Most regions of the visual system respond to general features, edges, colors, motion, depth. The fusiform face area responds preferentially to faces. When you see a face, this region activates rapidly and strongly. When you see an object that merely resembles a face, the same region activates, not as strongly, but still detectably, still quickly, still before your conscious mind has time to evaluate what it is looking at. The brain begins processing the social information in a face before it has confirmed that a face is actually there. It commits to the interpretation before verifying it. This is not careless. It is a feature, not a flaw. To understand why, you have to think about what faces meant to the human brain for almost all of evolutionary history. For hundreds of thousands of years, the most important information in any human environment was social and biological. Who is nearby? Are they familiar or unknown? Are they calm or hostile? Are they looking at you? All of that information was encoded in one specific type of image, a face. Missing a face in your environment was potentially fatal. Misidentifying a pattern as a face when it was not one cost almost nothing. The asymmetry of those two outcomes is everything. If you failed to detect a real face, you might not survive. If you detected a false face in a shadow or a rock formation, you wasted a fraction of a second and moved on. Evolution does not optimize for accuracy. It optimizes for survival. And a brain that sees too many faces is far safer than a brain that misses even one. So your visual system was built with an enormous bias toward face detection. It has an extremely low threshold for triggering the face recognition response. It needs only the barest hint of two eyes, a nose, and a mouth arranged in the correct approximate configuration, and it fires. The signal goes out before you consciously know it is happening. Researchers have measured this. Electroencephalography studies have shown that the brain produces a distinctive electrical response called the N170, which is specific to face processing, within about 170 milliseconds of seeing a face-like stimulus. 170 milliseconds. That is faster than a blink. That is faster than your conscious awareness can catch up to. By the time you consciously think there might be a face in that shadow, your visual system has already processed it as one. The conscious recognition is not the detection. It is the report. But the pareidolia story goes deeper than simple face detection, because the brain does not merely recognize patterns, it actively generates them. Your visual system is not a passive camera that records what is in front of you. It is a prediction engine. At every moment, your visual cortex is running a model of what the world should look like based on prior experience. When sensory data comes in, the brain compares it against the model. If the data is ambiguous, the brain does not wait for more information. It fills in the gaps using its best prediction. And faces are the most common and most strongly weighted prediction in the entire system. This is why pareidolia is so difficult to suppress. You cannot choose to stop seeing the face in the wood grain once you have seen it. Even knowing with absolute certainty that it is not a face, you will still see it. The percept has been generated, the model has been applied, the pattern has been locked in, and conscious knowledge cannot override it. This reveals something important about the nature of perception itself. What you see is not the world. It is your brain's best current hypothesis about the world, built from incoming data and corrected only slowly and partially by new information. The face in the shadow is not an error your brain makes. It is your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, and doing it so thoroughly that reality cannot fully override it. There is a condition that takes this further. People with Charles Bonnet syndrome, which typically occurs in individuals who have lost a significant amount of vision, report vivid and detailed visual hallucinations that include faces, not vague impressions. Specific detailed faces, sometimes expressive, sometimes moving, sometimes unfamiliar. The brain, deprived of sufficient incoming visual data to work with, generates its predictions without restraint. It fills the visual field with the things it most expects to see, and faces dominate that expectation completely. This condition is not a psychiatric disorder. It is the visual system operating without enough external input to anchor its predictions to the real world. It shows what the brain's face generation machinery looks like when the brakes are removed. But you do not need Charles Bonnet syndrome to experience a version of this. Sleep deprivation, fever, sensory restriction, extreme stress, and even ordinary tiredness can lower the threshold further. The less clear the incoming visual signal, the more the brain fills in from memory and prediction. The darker the room, the fewer the details available to contradict the hypothesis, the more your brain insists on finding a face. This is why the experience of seeing faces in the dark is so much more powerful than seeing them in broad daylight. It is not that darkness creates faces. It is that darkness removes the contradicting information that would normally prevent your brain from completing the pattern. The face was always the prediction. The light was the correction. And in the dark, the correction disappears. Now consider what this reveals about something much larger than face perception. If your visual system is a prediction engine that generates faces from ambiguous data, and that generation is fast, automatic, and difficult to override, then how much of your wider perception of the world operates on the same principle? How much of what you see at any moment is incoming data, and how much is your brain's prediction filling in the gaps? Researchers studying predictive processing, a framework that has become increasingly influential in neuroscience and cognitive science, argue that perception in general works this way. The brain is always predicting, always filling in, always generating a model of the world that is corrected by incoming data rather than built from it. The faces in the dark are not special. They are just the moments when the gap between the world and your brain's model becomes visible. In ordinary daylight, with rich sensory information flowing in, the corrections happen fast enough that the model stays close to reality, but the model is always there. The prediction is always running. The face is always the first thing your brain reaches for when the signal becomes unclear, which leads to a question that is simple to ask and genuinely difficult to answer. When you look at another person's face, how much of what you see is actually there? And how much is your brain completing a pattern it has been building and refining your entire life? How much of the face of someone you love is the face that is there? And how much is the face your brain has learned to expect? The faces in the dark were never there, but the system that generated them is running every second of every day. In the light, in the people around you, in everything your brain decides it recognizes. The question is not whether you are seeing faces that are not there. The question is how you would know the difference.